The Wognir commanders roared with cruel laughter when they saw the pathetic human defense force arrayed before them. 300 human soldiers against 10,000 hardened Wognir warriors in powered combat armor. Did these pitiful humans really think they stood a chance against the mighty galactic dominion? Peter Henry gritted his teeth as he peered through the sights of his railgun at the massive enemy dropships descending through the gray sky. The Wognir could laugh all they wanted. These arrogant alien bastards were about to get a harsh lesson in what happens when you dare to screw with the human race. It was the year 2437. The Galactic Dominion, a ruthless empire of conquered alien worlds, had assimilated most of the known universe into its sprawling territories. Only humanity still resisted, obstinately refusing to bend the knee. The lizard-like Wognir, the most powerful species in the Dominion, had set out to crush the human rebellion once and for all. Zephyrus, a remote human colony, was humanity's last bastion. If it fell, mankind would go extinct, wiped out by the genocidal Wognir. The survival of the entire human species hinged on the soldiers of Zephyrus holding the line. Peter and his 300 battle-hardened men hunkered down in the heavy fortifications surrounding the colony's central citadel. They were all that stood between 15,000 helpless human civilians and a gruesome death at the hands of the Wognir. The odds were stacked heavily against the human defenders. The Wognir invasion force was armed with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy: plasma cannons, antimatter missiles, and singularity generators. In contrast, the human troops made do with railguns, flechette launchers, and EMP mines cobbled together from scavenged parts. But Peter wasn't worried. Let the Wognir come with their fancy toys. Humanity would show them what real warriors could do with guts, brains, and fighting spirit. The men of Zephyrus were the best soldiers Earth had to offer. Special forces operators, hardened mercenaries, and elite commandos, each handpicked for this mission, and every one of them was prepared to give their lives in humanity's defense. Peter's second-in-command, a grizzled ex-Martian Marine named Vasquez, racked the charging handle on his railgun. "This is going to be one hell of a fight, sir," Vasquez said, his voice a low growl. "There's a whole goddamn army of lizards out there." Peter allowed himself a grim smile. Quantity has a quality all its own, but quality has a quality too. Those scaly bastards don't know it yet, but they've just kicked a hornet's nest. He turned to address his troops, his voice booming through the unit's comms. "Listen up. I won't lie to you. We're outnumbered and outgunned. But we're the only thing standing between the Wognir and the total conquest of humanity. The lizards think Zephyrus will be an easy win. They think they can just roll over us. Well, I say it's time to show them what human beings are made of. We've got a long history of beating the odds through sheer grit and audacity. This is our chance to make the Wognir regret they ever tangled with Earth. So let's give them hell, boys. For Zephyrus. For humanity." The human soldiers let out a bloodthirsty roar, beating their fists against their armored chests. They were afraid, yes. But more than that, they were filled with the reckless courage that had defined humanity's warriors since the dawn of time. The Wognir would soon learn the folly of underestimating mankind's tenacity in war. Peter turned back to the battlements, his grip tight on his railgun, his eyes blazing with resolve. He could see the first wave of Wognir drop pods landing at the edge of the cleared zone. Lizard soldiers in black armor poured out, fanning into battle formation. The human defenders steadied their aim, fingers hovering over triggers. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The Wognir dropships descended like a swarm of metallic locusts, disgorging thousands of black-armored alien troops. They surged towards the human fortifications, plasma rifles blazing, their hooting war cries filling the air. The lizards clearly expected to just steamroll over the puny 300 human defenders. But the arrogant Wognir were in for a rude awakening. As the first ranks of aliens entered the colony outskirts, hundreds of concealed gun ports suddenly opened up in the walls of seemingly innocuous buildings. A vicious crossfire of railgun slugs and flechettes ripped into the Wognir's front lines, shredding them without effort. Alien bodies were blown apart like bloody piñatas, as the humans' pre-sighted kill zones turned into a vicious meat grinder. Peter Henry gripped his carbine as he crouched behind a low wall, a predatory grin spreading across his face. The trap was sprung, and the Wagnir were caught in it like rats. As the aliens milled about in confused panic, Peter and his strike teams burst from hiding to launch rapid counterattacks. The human soldiers moved like vengeful ghosts through the colony they knew like the back of their hands. They would appear from nowhere, pour devastating fire into the bewildered Wagnir, then melt back into the shadows before the aliens could react. The high-tech weapons and sensors of the Wagnirs proved worse than useless in this brutal knife fight of an urban battle. The close confines of the colony favored the defenders, allowing them to negate the aliens' range advantage. Peter's troops hacked the Wagnir's comms and sensors, feeding them false data, jamming their transmissions. Blinded and off balance, the invaders floundered right into a web of booby traps and interlocking fields of fire. Peter himself led the most audacious strike yet. Worming through a maintenance tunnel, he emerged behind a landed Wagnir dropship, its troops disembarking down the ramp. Quick as a snake, Peter slithered inside, swiftly wiring demolition charges to the ship's power core. He barely made it to cover before the dropship detonated in a thunderous fireball, taking an entire enemy platoon with it. Up in orbit, Corvus the Cunning slammed a fist on his command chair as frantic reports poured in from the surface. Incredibly, his mighty invasion force was getting mauled by a tiny group of humans, led by this accursed Peter Henry. Bellowing in frustrated rage, Corvus threw more and more troops at the human defenses, trying to overwhelm them with sheer numbers. But Zephyrus Colony had been laid out from the start with defense in mind. Its labyrinthine corridors and reinforced bunkers turned the Wagnir advance into a nightmare of blind corners and deadly choke points. At every turn, Peter's soldiers were there, scourging the attackers with lethal precision. Snipers reaped a bloody toll, while coordinated ambushes wiped out entire Wagnir squads. Corvus's mounting casualty reports pushed him from rage into near insanity. Driven past reason by the humiliating resistance, he commanded his ships to commence an orbital bombardment, determined to bury these humans under their own rubble. But even as the first bombs began falling, Peter led a lightning raid on the Wagnir's forward artillery observation post. He put a railgun slug through the head of their spotter, then had his tech specialists seize control of the targeting system. Within minutes, the human soldiers had turned the Wagnir's own guns against them, raining destruction on the aliens' vulnerable landing zones and rear areas. Now trembling with apoplectic fury, Corvus ordered his own elite guard to the surface to butcher these humans in close combat. The Wagnir commander's personal cadre were the most fearsome warriors of the galactic dominion, each one a match for 10 ordinary soldiers. Corvus would brook no further delays in his conquest. These meddlesome Terran primates and their infuriating leader would be sliced into bloody ribbons. But Peter had held one final card up his sleeve for just such a moment, a salvaged EMP bomb, jury-rigged to the colony's main reactor. It was a desperation move, one that would burn out Zephyrus's power grid. But with the Wagnir elites landing in force, it was now or never. Peter gave the order, and a pulsing burst of electromagnetic energy washed outward from the human positions. As the EMP wave struck, the circuitry in the Wagnir's prized weaponry went up in sparks. Suddenly, the aliens' technological edge vanished. Their elite troopers were left clutching useless hunks of fused metal and plastic. Roaring with triumphant bloodlust, Peter led his soldiers in an all-out charge, determined to drive a stake through the heart of the invasion once and for all. The humans fell on the stunned Wagnir like lions upon lambs. This was the moment of decision, and every human there knew the stakes. They had to win now, or see humanity's last hope extinguished forever. Raw desperation and adrenaline raged through their veins as they crashed into the alien lines like a human battering ram. The fate of their entire species hung upon the outcome of the next few blood-soaked minutes. The EMP wave washed over the battlefield, frying the circuits of the Wagnir's high-tech weaponry. Sparks flew from their plasma rifles and power armor as systems shorted out. The once fearsome alien warriors stood confused, their technological advantage evaporating in an instant. Peter seized the moment. "Now's our chance. Charge!" he bellowed, vaulting over the barricade. 300 human soldiers surged forward, roaring battle cries. They crashed into the disoriented Wagner elites like a tidal wave. The aliens, accustomed to fighting at range, found themselves woefully unprepared for close combat. Peter tackled a Wagner officer, driving him to the ground. The alien's claws raked Peter's cheek, drawing blood. Peter responded with a vicious headbutt that cracked the Wagner's faceplate. All around, similar scenes played out as humans grappled with aliens in the mud. Vasquez fought nearby, wielding a length of rebar like a club. He bashed a Wagner's skull, then whirled to impale another through the throat. "Just like basic training, sir," he called out with a fierce grin. The humans' raw strength and fighting spirit more than made up for their lack of fancy gear. Wagners fell left and right, overwhelmed by the savage human assault. Up in orbit, Corvus stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His elite guard, the pride of the galactic dominion, was being pushed back by mere primates. How was this possible? "Impossible!" Corvus hissed. "I won't be defeated by these savages!" He opened a channel to his fleet. "All ships, commence orbital bombardment! Scour the surface clean!" But Peter had planned for this. In a hidden bunker, a team of human hackers furiously typed away at captured Wagner consoles. They'd spent months studying alien computer systems for just this moment. "We're in their targeting grid," one hacker reported. "Scrambling coordinates now." The Wagner ships opened fire, but their targeting was off. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds rained down on their own troops instead of the human positions. Alien soldiers scattered in panic as friendly fire tore through their ranks. Peter saw his chance. "Push through their lines," he ordered. "We're taking the fight to their leader." The human soldiers surged forward, exploiting gaps in the Wagner defenses. Peter led from the front, cutting a path straight toward the alien command post where Corvus directed the battle. Corvus saw the humans approaching and snarled in rage. He drew his ceremonial energy blade, its edge crackling with plasma. "I'll deal with this myself," he growled. Peter and Corvus met in single combat amidst the chaos of battle. The Wagner commander towered over Peter, his genetically enhanced muscles rippling beneath scaled skin. But Peter was faster, dodging Corvus's wild swings. "You're finished, human," Corvus spat. "Your species will be eradicated." Peter ducked another slash, then drove his combat knife into a chink in Corvus's armor. "Not today, lizard," he grunted. They grappled furiously, trading blows. Corvus landed a crushing hit that cracked Peter's ribs, but even as he gasped in pain, Peter managed to sweep the alien's legs out from under him. As Corvus toppled, Peter pounced. He drove his knife up through the Wagner's throat, twisting the blade. Corvus gurgled and went limp. A hush fell over the battlefield as word spread of the alien commander's death. The remaining Wagners lost heart. Some fled for their ships while others threw down their weapons in surrender. Peter's troops secured the colony, rounding up prisoners and tending to the wounded. The human civilians emerged from their shelters, cheering their saviors. As Peter oversaw the aftermath, he knew this was only the beginning. The Galactic Dominion would not take this defeat lightly. But humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with. "We've won the day," Peter told his troops. "But the real fight is just starting. Are you with me?" The soldiers roared their assent. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The galaxy would soon learn what it meant to go to war with humanity. The humans' victory on Zephyrus sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Peter Henry wasted no time. He gathered his troops and laid out their next moves. "We hit them hard and fast," Peter briefed his soldiers. "Supply depots, shipyards, garrison planets, nowhere is safe." Over the next months, human strike teams wreaked havoc across Wagner space. On Centauri 4, Vasquez led a raid that destroyed a fuel refinery. Zhang's squad infiltrated a shipyard on Proxima 2, sabotaging a dozen warships before they could launch. Peter himself spearheaded the boldest operations. He piloted a captured Wagner cruiser right into the heart of an occupied system, then unleashed a virus that crippled the orbital defenses. As alarms blared, Peter's troops deployed to the surface, freeing thousands of slaves and recruiting many to their cause. Word of the human resistance spread. On a dozen worlds, oppressed races rose up against their Wagner overlords. The galactic dominion found itself beset on all sides by rebellion. In the grand halls of the Wagner High Command, scaled fists slammed on tables. "This human vermin must be exterminated," roared General Strax. "Who will crush them?" A hulking figure stepped forward, armor gleaming. "I will," Field Marshal Kravar hissed, "and I will bathe in their blood." Kravar's campaign of terror began immediately. He razed rebellious worlds, slaughtering millions. But Peter stayed one step ahead, evacuating civilians and ambushing Wagner forces. Peter pored over stolen data in his war room. "Kravar's next target is Tantalus Prime," he announced. "We make our stand there." As Kravar's fleet approached Tantalus, Peter's plan sprang into action. Civilian transports streamed from the surface as human fighters harassed the Wagner ships. Kravar sneered at the pitiful resistance. "Deploy in standard assault formation," he ordered. "Crush them quickly." But as Wagner troops touched down, chaos erupted. Their artillery exploded, sabotaged by infiltrators. Hijacked transports opened fire on their own forces. And through it all, human strike teams hit hard and vanished into the shadows. On the bridge of his command ship, Kravar raged. "How is this possible? Find me Peter Henry." As if in answer, alarms blared. A stolen dropship had breached their defenses. Peter himself led the assault team that stormed the bridge. "Kravar!" Peter shouted. "Your reign of terror ends now!" The Wagner Marshal spun, energy blade igniting. But before he could strike, a stun grenade detonated at his feet. Peter's team swarmed the dazed alien, subduing him. "We've got him!" Peter yelled into his comm. "Fall back to evac point!" As they dragged the captured Kravar to their ship, the Wagner vessel's self-destruct countdown echoed through the halls. Peter and his squad sprinted aboard their dropship, blasting free of the doomed command ship, just as it erupted into a fireball. Tantalus was saved, Kravar captured, and the human resistance had struck a crippling blow against the Dominion. But Peter knew the war was nowhere near the end. As their dropship rocketed to safety, he turned to his newest prisoner. "You and I are going to have a long talk, Kravar," Peter said, "and then we're going to bring down your entire empire." The stolen dropship shuddered as it blasted away from the Wagner command vessel. Peter gripped the restraints, his eyes fixed on the screen. Behind them, the massive ship's reactor went critical. A blinding flash erupted, followed by a shockwave that buffeted their small craft. "Hang on!" shouted the pilot, fighting the controls. Peter turned to their captive. Field Marshal Kravar glared back, mandibles clicking in barely contained fury. The Wagner commander was bound securely, but his eyes promised vengeance. "Your move, Lizard," Peter said, his voice low. "Cooperate, and your troops on Tantalus stand down. Refuse, and we'll see how they fare without leadership." Kravar hissed, but nodded stiffly. Peter tapped his comm unit. "This is Henry. Get me a secure channel to Wagner High Command." The tense negotiations that followed lasted hours. Peter leveraged every ounce of Kravar's value, demanding and receiving concessions. When it was done, he slumped in exhaustion. "We've got our ceasefire," he announced to his team. "Let's get those civilians to safety." On Tantalus, the human resistance sprang into action. Transports loaded with families lifted off under the wary eyes of Wagner troops. Peter oversaw the evacuation personally, scanning the crowds for any sign of trouble. A child stumbled, crying out. Without hesitation, Peter scooped her up, carrying her to safety. The girl's mother clasped his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Word of the daring raid spread like wildfire. On a dozen worlds, oppressed populations whispered of Earth's defiance. In dingy bars and secret meetings, resistance recruiters found eager volunteers. But Peter knew the respite was fleeting. In his war room, he pored over intelligence reports. The Wagner High Command was marshaling its forces, determined to crush the human uprising once and for all. "We need a game changer," Peter muttered. His eyes fell on a report about an experimental Wagner shipyard. A plan began to form. Days later, Peter led a strike team in a precision raid on the facility. They moved swiftly, disabling security and cornering a group of alien technicians. "Your expertise just got drafted," Peter told the startled Wagners. "Don't worry, you'll be compensated handsomely, assuming we all survive what comes next." Under the technicians' guidance, Peter's team rigged several derelict ships with prototype slipstream drives. The untested technology crackled with barely contained energy. "This is insane," muttered Vasquez, eyeing the jerry-rigged systems. Peter clapped him on the shoulder. "Probably, but it's our best shot. You in?" Vasquez grinned. "Always, boss." They broadcast Kravar's location, daring the Wagner fleet to give chase. Then, with a prayer and a deep breath, Peter gave the order. The slipstream drives flared to life, tearing holes in the fabric of space. His small flotilla plunged into the swirling vortex of the Krestak Nebula. The Wagner Armada followed, their superior numbers giving them confidence. But as they entered the nebula's treacherous currents, chaos erupted. The human ship's drives overloaded in a cascade of energy. A massive subspace shockwave rippled outward, catching the Wagner fleet unprepared. On the bridge of his command ship, Peter watched in awe as the enemy vessels floundered, their systems scrambled by the energy surge. "Now!" he barked into the comm. "All ships, engage!" The human resistance fleet decloaked, boxing in the reeling Wagners. Taken completely by surprise, the once mighty armada found itself fighting for survival. Across the galaxy, the trap sprung in the Krestak Nebula was the signal thousands had awaited. On world after world, resistance cells rose up. Supply depots were sabotaged, garrisons overwhelmed, and planetary defense grids hijacked. The Galactic Dominion, caught flat-footed, struggled to respond. Their vaunted war machine, stretched thin by rebellion, began to crumble. In the midst of the Krestak Nebula, Peter Henry stood on his bridge, watching the battle unfold. Years of guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run tactics, and desperate gambles had led to this moment. Now, at last, humanity had a real chance to break the Wagner stranglehold on the galaxy. "All ships!" Peter's voice rang out, steady and clear. "This is the moment that decides everything. For Earth, for freedom, attack!" "For Earth, for freedom, attack!" Peter's voice rang out across the comm channels. The human fleet surged forward, engines blazing as they plunged deeper into the swirling chaos of the Krestak Nebula. Crackling energy discharges lit up the void, casting eerie shadows across the hulls of both human and Wagner ships. Commander Sarah Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "This is Blue Squadron. We're engaging the enemy's left flank. Watch for debris, people." Peter watched from the bridge as Blue Squadron's fighters darted between towering plumes of superheated gas, their weapons finding vulnerable spots on the reeling Wagner cruisers. Explosions bloomed silently in the void as enemy ships succumbed to the precision strikes. "Sir, we've got readings on a group of Krestak ships approaching from Vector 319er, reported his tactical officer. Peter nodded. "Patch me through." The scarred face of a Krestak warrior filled the view screen. "This is Captain Zorn of the liberated Krestak. We stand ready to join your assault, human." "Glad to have you with us, Captain," Peter replied. "Form up on our port side and target their supply ships. Cut them off at the knees." As the battle raged, Jacob Mendoza led his infiltration team through the cramped corridors of a Wagner battlecruiser. Sparks flew from damaged conduits as the ship shuddered under the rebel assault. "Almost there," Jacob whispered, checking his wrist computer. "Engine room should be just ahead." They rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of Wagner Marines. For a heartbeat, both sides froze in surprise. Then chaos erupted. Jacob dove for cover as energy bolts sizzled past. He rolled, came up firing, and dropped two Wagners in quick succession. His team responded with practiced efficiency, outmaneuvering the aliens in the confined space. "Clear!" shouted Jacob's second in command. "But they'll have sounded the alarm." Jacob nodded grimly. "Then we work fast. Move." They sprinted the final meters to the engine room, dispatching the panicked technicians inside with ruthless efficiency. Jacob's explosives expert immediately set to work, planting charges at key junctures. 5 minutes to detonation, she reported. "We need to move." As they fought their way back to their insertion point, the ship rocked violently. Emergency klaxons blared. "Feels like our diversion's working," Jacob grunted, steadying himself against a bulkhead. Outside, the nebula itself seemed to come alive. The carefully placed slipstream charges detonated in a cascading wave, warping the very fabric of space-time. Wagner ships caught in the maelstrom were torn apart or flung wildly off course, their crews helpless against the fury Peter had unleashed. On the bridge of the Wagner flagship, Field Marshal Cravar snarled in frustration. "It's a trap. All ships disengage and—" His words were cut short as the deck lurched beneath him. Warning lights flashed across every console. "My lord," a junior officer stammered, "we've lost contact with half the fleet. The nebula storms are—" The rest of his report was drowned out by the screech of tearing metal. Cravar stumbled as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Through the viewports, he saw the impossible. Space itself seemed to be tearing apart around them. "Bring us about," Cravar roared. "We must—" The bridge doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks and shrapnel. Peter Henry stood framed in the opening, particle rifle raised. "It's over, Cravar," Peter said, his voice cold. "Surrender now, and I'll spare what's left of your fleet." Cravar's eyes darted wildly, seeking escape. Finding none, he slumped in defeat. Peter strode forward, securing the alien commander. He tapped his comm unit. "This is Henry. I want this broadcast on all frequencies now." Moments later, Cravar's battered visage appeared on screens across the beleaguered Wagner fleet. Peter's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "This is Peter Henry of the Human Resistance. Your commander is defeated. Your fleet is in ruins. But it doesn't have to end here. Lay down your arms, and you have my word. You will be treated fairly. Continue to fight, and you condemn yourselves to destruction. The choice is yours." For long moments, silence reigned. Then, one by one, Wagner ships began powering down their weapons. Surrender signals flooded the comm channels. The acrid stench of ozone and scorched metal filled Peter's nostrils as he strode through the smoking wreckage of the Gormash Prime Jump Gate Control Center. Bodies of Wagner shock troops littered the floor, their augmented armor riddled with precise holes from human weaponry. "Status report," Peter barked, his voice cutting through the chaos of shouted orders and clanging repair work. Lieutenant Rodriguez snapped to attention. "Sir, we've secured the main control hub. Tech teams are working to lock out any remote override attempts." Peter nodded, his eyes scanning the blinking consoles. "And the Wagner counterattack?" "Scattered and disorganized, sir. Our ambush caught them completely off guard." A grin tugged at Peter's lips. "Good. Have Akira's team start feeding false transit data through the network. I want every Wagner supply line in this sector thrown into disarray." As Peter turned to leave, a thunderous explosion rocked the station. He steadied himself against a bulkhead, then broke into a run towards the source of the blast. Rounding a corner, he found a squad of his Marines pinned down by withering fire from a group of Wagner holdouts. Without hesitation, Peter dove into cover beside them. "Corporal Chen, sit rep," he shouted over the din of battle. Chen's face was streaked with blood and grime. 5, maybe 6 hostiles, sir. They've got some kind of heavy weapon emplacement." Peter's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Cover me!" Before anyone could object, he vaulted over their makeshift barricade. Time seemed to slow as Peter sprinted across the open corridor, plasma bolts sizzling past him. He slid behind a fallen support beam, heart pounding. From his new vantage point, Peter could see the Wagner position. A quick hand signal to Chen, and his Marines laid down a blistering volley of suppressing fire. Peter seized his moment. He hurled a compact EMP grenade directly into the Wagner emplacement. The device detonated with a sharp crack, sending arcs of blue lightning crawling over the alien weaponry. In the moment of confusion that followed, Peter and his squad surged forward. The close-quarters battle was brutal and swift. When the smoke cleared, the last pockets of Wagner resistance on Gormash Prime had been extinguished. Hours later, Peter stood on the command deck of his flagship, studying a holographic map of nearby systems. Gormash Prime glowed a vibrant green, while dozens of red Wagner strongholds blinked ominously. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving reports of uprisings on Korshvav and Nexus Station. They're requesting our support." Peter's eyes narrowed as he considered the strategic implications. "Alert Isaac Rains and the Lost Souls. I want them to provide air support for the Korsh rebels. We'll dispatch ground forces to Nexus Station." As the orders went out, Peter turned his attention to a flashing alert on a nearby console. It was a message from Akira Ito, encrypted using their most secure protocols. Peter's eyes widened as he read the contents. Akira's team had successfully infiltrated the Wagner military network, gaining unprecedented access to their communications and logistical data. A slow smile spread across Peter's face. With this new intelligence windfall, they could stay one step ahead of any Wagner countermove. The momentum of their campaign would only accelerate. "Navigation," Peter called out. "Set a course for the Helix cluster. It's time we took the fight to the heart of Wagner space." As his fleet prepared to jump, Peter allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The galactic dominion was reeling, and humanity's hour of liberation drew ever closer. But he knew the true test still lay ahead, when the Wagners would inevitably marshal their remaining strength for a desperate counter-offensive. Peter Henry, the scourge of Wagner oppression, would be ready. Peter Henry stood at the viewport of Ragnarok's command citadel, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. The vastness of space stretched before him, a canvas upon which humanity's future would be written. He turned as the doors hissed open, admitting Commander Rachel Moss. "Sir, the latest reports from the Caladan system are in," Rachel said, handing him a datapad. Peter scanned the information, nodding with approval. "Progress is ahead of schedule. Well done, Commander." Rachel allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, sir. The isolated nature of the system has proven advantageous. We've managed to keep construction largely hidden from prying eyes." Peter activated a holographic display, showing the sprawling network of habitats and shipyards taking shape around Caladan's outer planets. "And the slipstream drive for Ragnarok?" "Final calibrations are underway," Rachel replied. "Our engineers assure me it will be operational within the week." A proximity alert chimed, drawing their attention to an incoming vessel. Peter recognized the sleek lines of Admiral Vincent Clark's flagship. "It seems our Hellfire task force has returned," Peter mused. "Let's hear what the Admiral has to report." Minutes later, Clark strode onto the command deck, his uniform bearing the scorch marks of recent combat. He saluted crisply. "Mission accomplished, sir. We hit 3 Wagner supply depots in rapid succession. Their logistics network in the Orion Arm is in shambles." Peter clasped the Admiral's shoulder. "Excellent work, Vincent. But I fear we've only angered the beast. We need to draw them out, force them to commit their remaining strength." As if on cue, the comm officer's voice rang out. "Sir, urgent transmission from Colonel Ricker on Kartok." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing Hans Ricker's face, smeared with grime and blood. The sounds of battle echoed in the background. "Command, the uprising is underway. We've seized control of the main production facilities, but Wagner reinforcements are inbound. We need support." Peter's mind raced, weighing the strategic implications. "Hold your position, Colonel. Help is on the way." He turned to Clark. "Admiral, take the Hellfire task force and rendezvous with our forces at Kartok. Buy Ricker the time he needs to fully secure those facilities." As Clark hurried to comply, Peter received another incoming transmission. The scarred visage of Luka Volkov filled the screen. "Commander Henry, My team has successfully disabled the Gravwell generators in Sector 17. Wagner warp capabilities in the region are offline. Peter nodded, the pieces of his grand strategy falling into place. Well done, Volkov. Fall back to our prearranged rally points. The Wagners will be looking for payback, and I intend to give them a target they can't resist. Over the following days, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Confederacy's bold strikes had thrown the Wagner Dominion into disarray. Peter watched with grim satisfaction as the enemy's response took shape. A massive armada, gathering for what the Wagner triumvirate surely believed would be a killing blow. From Ragnarok's war room, Peter addressed his assembled commanders. The enemy approaches, just as we anticipated. They think to catch us unprepared, to crush our rebellion before Ragnarok reaches full strength. They are mistaken. He gestured to the holographic display, showcasing the station's formidable defenses. When they emerge from Slipstream, they'll find themselves in a carefully prepared kill box. Admiral Clark, your Hellfire squadrons will engage their flanks. Colonel Ricker, your captured Kartok weapon platforms are in position to unleash hell. And Captain Rains, your lost souls will be our surgical blade, striking at their command ships. The war room erupted in a flurry of activity as final preparations were made. Peter strode to the command deck, his face a mask of concentration. All personnel to battle stations. Activate defense grids. Launch drone squadrons. Space itself seemed to shudder as the Wagner armada translated into normal space. For a heartbeat, an eerie silence reigned. Then Ragnarok unleashed its fury. Streams of turbo-laser fire lashed out, catching the lead elements of the Wagner fleet completely by surprise. Explosions blossomed silently in the void as strike-craft and hunter-killer drones swarmed among the enemy capital ships. "Multiple contacts," the sensor officer called out. "Wagner battle groups attempting to regroup." Peter's voice cut through the chaos. "All units, execute attack pattern Omega. Don't let them gain a foothold." From his vantage point, Peter watched as Isaac Rains led his lost souls in a daring attack run on the Wagner flagship. The nimble fighters darted between streams of defensive fire, loosing salvos of missiles that stitched lines of destruction across the massive vessel's hull. Ragnarok shuddered as it absorbed return fire from the beleaguered Wagner fleet, but its formidable defenses held, the station's powerful shields deflecting the worst of the assault. "Sir," Rachel reported, her voice tense, "enemy forces are attempting to concentrate their fire on our western quadrant. They're trying to punch through." Peter's eyes narrowed. "Redirect power to the shields in that sector, and prepare to execute emergency slipstream jump if necessary." The battle raged on, a titanic clash that would decide the fate of humanity and all alien species. As Wagner ships exploded or fled in disarray, Peter allowed himself a moment of hope. The tide was turning, and humanity's hour of liberation drew ever closer. Peter Henry stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Calrac 6. The once thriving industrial world now glowed an angry red, its surface cracked and broken. "World cracker detonation successful," reported Admiral Clark. "Calrac 6 is no more." Peter nodded, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. "And the Wagner fleet?" "Scattered and in full retreat, sir," Clark replied. "They're falling back to the Karak quarantine zone." Peter's eyes narrowed. "Then that's where we follow. Prepare the fleet for pursuit." As the human armada plunged into the treacherous expanse of the quarantine zone, chaos erupted. Antimatter mines detonated against ship hulls, tearing jagged holes in their armor. Temporal anomalies warped space-time around them, causing weapons fire to materialize seconds before it was fired. On the bridge of his Corsair, Isaac Rains barked orders to his lost souls. "Bravo Squadron, form up on me. We're going to hit that Wagner cruiser while it's vulnerable." The nimble fighters darted through the debris field, plasma cannons blazing. The Wagner vessel's shields flickered and died under the assault. Meanwhile, Colonel Ricker's commandos used the confusion to their advantage. They boarded a crippled Wagner battleship, fighting their way to the engine room. Ricker planted demolition charges as his team provided covering fire. Charges set, Ricker shouted into his comm. Everyone out now! The human strike team extracted moments before the charges detonated, leaving the Wagnir ship a lifeless hulk. As the battle raged, Peter received word that the Wagnir leadership had holed up in the Kresh-Kal habitat. He turned to the captive Field Marshal Kravar. You know the codes to bypass their defenses, Peter said, his voice cold. Cooperate, and you might live to see another day. Kravar's alien features twisted in a mix of fear and resignation. I will do as you ask, human. With Kravar's assistance, a strike team led by Colonel Volkov breached Kresh-Kal's outer defenses. They fought room by room, corridor by corridor, against fanatical Wagnir guards. Volkov ducked under a plasma burst, returning fire with his assault rifle. Push forward, he yelled to his team. We've got them on the run. As Volkov's team cleared a path, Ye-Suk Kim and her psionic operatives advanced. Kim's eyes glowed with otherworldly energy as she unleashed a psychic assault, sending Wagnir soldiers reeling in mental agony. Peter Henry himself joined the final push into the Wagnir command bunker. He kicked down the reinforced door, weapon at the ready. Inside, he found the surviving Wagnir leadership, the architects of humanity's enslavement, cowering before him. Peter's voice rang out, filled with cold fury. Your empire is finished. Surrender now, or face annihilation. One by one, the Wagnir warlords dropped to their knees. The Supreme Imperator, his ornate armor scorched and dented, approached Peter with trembling steps. He extended his ceremonial electroblade, offering the hilt to the human conqueror. As Peter grasped the weapon, a cheer went up from the human forces. The Wagnir Dominion, once thought invincible, had fallen. But even as victory washed over him, Peter couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something else was stirring in the depths of space, a threat perhaps even greater than the one they had just vanquished. Peter Henry stood at the viewport of Ragnarok, his eyes fixed on the shattered remains of Calrax VI. The victory against the Wagnirs felt hollow now, a Pyrrhic triumph in the face of an even greater threat. Sir, Admiral Clark's voice crackled over the comm. We've received an urgent transmission from Denkar. You need to see this. Peter strode to the command center where a holographic display flickered to life. The image showed a desolate cityscape, buildings crumbling and streets empty of life. At the center stood Admiral Clark, his face ashen. My God, Peter breathed, and what happened here? Clark's voice trembled. The entire population. They're gone, consumed from within. We found only one survivor, a child. The camera panned to reveal a small boy huddled in the corner, his eyes wide with terror. Peter leaned in, studying the child's face. Who is he? His name is Aaron, Clark replied. He's been changed by whatever did this. We need Kim here immediately. Hours later, Ye-Suk Kim arrived on Denkar. She knelt before Aaron, her eyes glowing with psionic energy as she reached out to touch his mind. The boy screamed, his body convulsing as Kim probed deeper. Suddenly, Kim recoiled, gasping for air. Peter, she whispered, her voice strained. I saw horrors beyond imagination. The Zirki, they're coming. Peter's blood ran cold as Kim recounted her vision. Monstrous entities gestating within planets, consuming all life to birth themselves into reality. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The Wagnirs, Peter said, his voice hoarse. They were just pawns, preparing the galaxy for slaughter, Kim finished. Peter's fists clenched as he issued rapid-fire orders. Quarantine every system within range of the psychic shockwave. Muster the fleet for containment operations. We need to buy time. But even as the words left his mouth, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Entire systems going dark, consumed by an unseen horror that spread faster than they could react. In the chaos, Isaac Raines's voice cut through the din. Sir, permission to take the lost souls to Sectorus. We can slow them down, give you a chance to regroup. Peter hesitated, knowing it was likely a suicide mission, but they were out of options. Granted, Godspeed, Isaac. The lost souls streaked towards Sectorus, their fighters laden with antimatter warheads. As they approached the planet, Rains gasped at the nightmarish vista before him. The surface writhed with otherworldly energies, reality itself warping around a gestating horror. "All units, fire at will!" Rains roared. The sky erupted in a firestorm as the lost souls unleashed their payload. For a moment, it seemed to work. The alien presence recoiled, its psychic tendrils faltering. But the victory was short-lived. One by one, Rains watched his squad mates disappear in bursts of static. His own fighter shuddered, systems failing as he fought to maintain control. With the last of his power, he broadcast a final message. "We've bought you time, sir. Make it count." As Rains' battered fighter limped away from Sectorus, Peter Henry faced the grim reality of their situation. The Zyrki were spreading unchecked, and conventional tactics were useless against them. In desperation, he turned to Akira Ito. "The Wagner archives. Is there anything in there that can help us?" Ito's eyes lit up. "Perhaps. There are references to an ancient weapon, the Tear Initiator. If we can build it, we might have a chance." Peter nodded, his face set with grim purpose. "Do it. Whatever it takes." Deep in the intergalactic void, construction began on humanity's last hope. As Luka Volkov's Marines fought wave after wave of Zyrki incursions, Peter watched the massive dreadnought take shape. The cost was staggering. Peter's oldest friends and allies fell one by one, buying precious seconds for the Tear Initiator's completion. Each loss cut deep, but Peter forced himself to press on. Finally, as Hee-Suk Kim's psionic shields began to falter, Peter gave the order. The Tear Initiator hummed to life, reality itself buckling around it. As space-time fractured, Peter felt a moment of vertigo. When his vision cleared, he found himself adrift in a sea of shattered dimensions. Around him, the remnants of humanity's fleet struggled to navigate the chaos. They had escaped the Zyrki, but at what cost? As the trans-reality arcs assembled, preparing for an endless journey through uncharted realms, Peter caught sight of Aaron. The boy's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as he pointed to a distant flicker in the void. "There," Aaron whispered, "our future." Peter squinted, trying to make out what the child saw. For a moment, he thought he glimpsed a pristine world, untouched by the horrors they'd left behind. Then it was gone, swallowed by the maelstrom of fractured realities. With a heavy heart, Peter gave the order to depart. They were exiles now, wanderers in a broken cosmos. But as long as they survived, hope remained. Someday, somehow, humanity would find its way home.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.